Hello there, thanks so much for watching again. Alright, on this drive, we are continuing the June 2018 Road and Track, a gilded age. Luxury buyers have always been spoiled, but now they're spoiled for choice. Old world sedans, newcomers, and SUVs alike. To discern the future of luxury, one must indulge in it by Jack Ruth. When it comes to luxury cars, we are all Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart. In determining whether Louis Malle's film Les Amants was legally obscene, he gave us an expression for the ages. Quote, I shall not today attempt further to define dirty videos, but I know it when I see it. End quote. The same holds true for the idea of a luxury car. The concept seems obvious, but the details can be hard to pin down. What defines luxury? Features? Cost? Exclusivity? In some places, the mere possession of a private automobile is considered a luxury. Elsewhere, valets are parking flying spurs in the back lot to make room for phantoms up front. How about the car part? Nowadays, a full-size luxury vehicle is twice as likely to be an SUV as a traditional sedan, according to IHS Markit. So if we still think we know a luxury car when we see one, it might be time to get our vision checked. To do just that, we selected 3 very different ways to spend 6 figures and release them in their natural habitat of Pasadena, California. First up, the Lexus LS500, freshly reimagined as an unashamedly Japanese take on the premium sedan. It no longer relies on price and durability to lure buyers from the Europeans. Next up, Lincoln's all-new Navigator Black Label takes the luxury SUV to dizzying and remarkably self-indulgent heights. Last but not least is the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. No other vehicle better exemplifies the luxury car in its traditional form. After more than 5 decades, the S-Class remains peerless, not so much primus inter pares as Tyrannosaurus Rex, as with the Rolex Daytona or Hermes Birkin bag. The desirability of the object itself transcends trend or fashion. This is not a head-to-head comparison. The Navigator can't catch the Lexus on a fast road, nor can the S63 tow an Airstream. We don't expect the Lincoln to herald the obsolescence of an S-Class as the archetypical luxury car. On the contrary, the S-Class will likely retain a certain eminence all the way to the demise of the personally owned automobile. In the uncertain times between now and then, however, a change is going to come. Luxury realigned. The appeal of the first Lexus LS400 was more or less the same reason people see a Guns N' Roses tribute band. From a distance, it looks like the real thing, but you are less worried about breakdowns. In its successor, the LS430 aped the bland Boeing-esque massiveness of the 1990s W140 S-Class. The 4th-gen LS460 owed much to its contouring and profile to the 2000 to 2006 W220. In that context, the spindle grille and 8-window NASCAR-raked profile of the LS500 can be seen for what they truly are, a declaration of independence. There was a time when it was profitable for a Lexus to resemble a Mercedes, but the prestige of Toyota's luxury brand is now so strong that the most profitable thing for a Lexus to resemble is, in fact, another Lexus. This realignment also reflects a reality that Toyota might be less eager to trumpet. In 1990, the LS400 was the core product and the best-selling model at Lexus dealers, but in 2017, the LS460 accounted for just under 1.5% of the brand's total volume in the US, outsold by every vehicle in the lineup. Yet Lexus has extracted an ornament from an inconvenience. Shorn of the responsibility to hold up a balance sheet, the LS500 is free to serve as a branding talisman, a corporate mission statement rendered in sinuous metal. This is apparent from the moment you open the remarkably light door and take a seat behind the wheel. Its predecessor featured a forest of wood trim, but the new car cuts that down to a few decorative panels and a presence on the steering wheel. Where the timber used to be, we have great wave-styled contrast-stitched leather. The two-tone metal bands of the center console vents evoke high-end Japanese stereo products from the 80s. The climate control panel reinforces that theme and offers a minor but supremely satisfying refinement. The desired temperature is shown on a small, high-res black and white LCD display, and when you change the setting, the digits perform a rolling animation. They say it never rains in Southern California, but as we point to the LS500 out of La Cañada, Flint Ridge, and up to the mountains of the Angeles Crest Highway, a downpour is creating pools of water at every apex. Such a pretty area too, by the way. The Lexus is untroubled. The twin-turbo V6 applies its 416 horsepower through the rear 20-inch summer tires and effortlessly rockets up the short segments between turns. With the drive mode set to Sport S+, body rolled to windows in a communicative minimum, and the transmission swaps gears with aggressive clunks. The experience will be familiar to anybody who has driven the Lexus IS350 Sport, as will the packaging. The LS500 is just an inch or two smaller in most dimensions than the S-Class, but in contrast to that car's airy, spacious cockpit, The Lexus's interior is intimate, verging on cramped, with headroom barely sufficient for a 6'2" driver. Call it a child of a lesser god, or perhaps just faithful to the packaging of the old 560 SEL. The difference is further reflected in the instrument panel, where the horizontal sweep of the S63's full LCD combination dashboard and infotainment module is replaced in the LS by a modest screen set deep within a leather bezel resembling a Wolf valet tray. Second row accommodations are tight. There is a power folding ottoman for the VIP sitting on the right rear, but using it renders the seat ahead non-functional. On the twisting path to the Mount Wilson Observatory, the LS500 confirms its excellence as a driver's car, never experiencing brake fade and permitting a small but gratifying amount of sideways attitude before the stability system clamps down gently but firmly. The rest of the car is traditional Lexus. For better and worse, it can be eerily quiet. More than once we mistook the well-insulated engine at idle for an auto stop system. The cabin can mimic a concert hall, although the Mark Levinson branded stereo is not up to the standards we set by the Rebel Ultima system in the Navigator. While the LS's combination, volume, and track selection knob is a work of functional art and should be standard in every car, accessing other features requires a tiresome slog through the center console menu. The transition from cover band to concert headliner suits the LS. Rightly renowned since its birth for being durable, it can now also be characterized as desirable. New shape of sophistication. In 1973, real estate broker Robert J. Ringer published a book in which he asserts, quote, "Every person has the inherent right to self-proclaim, to announce at any time he chooses that he is on any level he chooses to be on," end quote. But self-proclaiming only works, he adds, if you can back it up by performing on that level. Consider the $100,315 sticker price of our Lincoln Navigator Black Label an example of self-proclaiming. The original 1998 Navigator, basically an F-150 with a cap on the back, would have been a bad joke at this price. Its replacement, which persisted from 2003 to 2017 through a series of shambolic facelifts, was mechanically competent but short on curb appeal. Nothing in the Navigator's history suggests it has the heritage or prestige to compete with six-figure sedans. Casual observers are forgiven their skepticism. This latest effort is not particularly handsome from any angle, given even in the added cost and very vintage chroma molten gold of our test vehicle. You might dismiss it as a plated plastic luxury front end tacked on to yet another full-size SUV. The magic is on the inside. When was the last time an American car had an interior this thoroughly designed, seemingly without regard to cost of materials or difficulty of assembly? The Suicide Door 1961 Continental, maybe. The Navigator Black Label bristles with chrome, leather, exotic woods, and transparent surfaces, all of which are perfectly lit through massive side windows and a panoramic sunroof. The result is what you'd get if Frank Gehry were to redesign the Rolls-Royce Ghost with assistance from Ray Ames. Not everything is beyond reproach. The standard issue F-150 center stack buttons are uncomfortable in their newly upscale surroundings. But this is, in virtually all respects, a modern expression of the no corners cut philosophy that guided the development of the Continental Mark II and its immediate successors. Let Rip Van Winkle fall asleep behind the wheel of a parked Lincoln in 1963, then wake him up in the Navigator Black Label. He would not be the slightest bit surprised. Scratch that. He would be amazed by the Navigator's dashboard and its cornucopia of fascinating graphics. The main gauges are presented as chrome-trimmed dials set in a darkness and spotlight around the position of the indicator needles. Twisting the drive mode knob results in a full-screen animation for each choice. Over the course of 400 miles, subtle touches became apparent. The steering wheel is the best on offer here, providing a wide range of functions without distracting the driver. Adjustable seats are effectively perfect and easy to use. The driver aids are least intrusive and most helpful, particularly the radar cruise control. The Lincoln is not as quiet as the Lexus, but it's not far off, particularly at low speeds. As with the LS500, the second row is tight, although each of the two captain chairs has its own video screen and a floating mount on the seat ahead. The third row benefits from extra space created by the use of an independent rear suspension. Thanks in part to that suspension, the Navigator splits the ride quality and dynamic differences between its live axle-equipped full-size SUV competition and the top-end sedans. It accelerates with authority that nearly equals the Lexus, and it is more than capable of maintaining unreasonable speeds up and down a mountain, but it makes no pretense at sporting deportment. Perhaps the last quality is why the Navigator is so satisfying. For the past few decades, luxury buyers have been forced to eat their sporty vegetables before they may have their luxurious desserts. We have come to associate aggressive suspension tuning and touring car style as inevitable consequences of a high transaction price when, in fact, they were never mandatory. This big Lincoln cuts that Gordian knot with a chrome and leather sword, and that alone is enough to validate its self-proclamation. Benchmark luxury. It's a German icon turned global citizen, bred for the Autobahn but found everywhere from Los Angeles to Lagos. Beloved by owners as difficult as John as different as John Gotti and Johnny Cash. Most critically, the Mercedes S-Class has long been the only way to spend this kind of cash on an automobile without raising the slightest question as to your taste or sanity. Yet there are barbarians at that particular gate, and their numbers are swelling, which is probably why Mercedes is attempting to push those boundaries of price and taste even further. As optioned, our S63 rings the register for nearly twice the MSRP of a standard S450 sedan. The difference between this car and the outstanding base S560 is over $70,000, enough to buy a Corvette ZR1, which more or less matches the AMG in a drag race. Yet it's not hard to see where the money went. The hand-built engine twisting the crank to the tune of 603 horsepower and a diesel truck like 664 pound-feet of torque. The outrageous interior, stem to stern with leather stitch on top of leather, and big complex pieces of carbon fiber, forged wheels, a refrigerator in the rear console, seats that offer multiple programs of massage and pressure relief. This is luxury with the purity of raw opium, and it can feel equally difficult to give up. Another form of luxury, one relentlessly promoted by Mercedes-Benz, is semi-autonomous driving technology. Yet the S63's $2,250 driver assistance package seems designed to punish more than assist. Crossing the road's edge line, or anything that looks like it, results in a harsh brake and swerve that is guaranteed to elicit a middle finger or worse from the pickup behind you. No Elizabethan manservant ever displayed this much truculence in the performance of his duty. As one would expect from AMG, the power would make Lord Action reach for an air sickness bag, and it gives no sense of abating until the speedometer is buried deep into the area marked felonious. On a fast two-lane back road, it matches the Lexus for mid-corner speed and obliterates it accelerating and slowing down. Left lane dwellers who register neither the Lincoln's bulk nor the cruel alien visage of the Lexus exhibit a knee-jerk willingness to yield to the three-pointed star approaching at warp speed in their mirrors. For comfort and coddling, the Lincoln might have the best driver's seat, but passengers will universally prefer the rear accommodations of the S63. It's spacious and long-haul comfortable, boasting a variety of first-class touches, including pillows that attach to the adjustable headrest, very Emirates A380 business class, which is surely no accident. Mercedes has discerned that there's money to be made in upscale variants, which is why even more expensive S65 AMG and Mercedes Maybach models join the S63 in the showroom. It's a testament to the luxury status of the S-Class that, even equipped to nearly $180,000, the S63 feels like a value. Part of the car's charm has always been its ability to transcend the tastes of its owners. It bears the desperate indigenities of quilted ostrich interior, gull-wing conversions, and no-option selected black over tan configuration with equal grace and felicity. Yet the S63, delightful as it might be, just whets our appetite for the old money luxury of a standard S-Class. Even the entry-level S450 has that superbly spacious cabin with its Focke-Wulf wraparound visibility, the absolutely stress-free absorption of everything from freeway to back alley, and the knowledge that you have chosen one of the safest vehicles in history. To pile onto that, as the S63 does, it is trend to awaken middle ground between techno tour de force and wretched excess. Justice Potter's decision to draw a tolerant distinction between the prurient and the genuinely obscene opened the floodgates to massive and permanent changes in popular culture. Similarly, a seismic shift in our definition of luxury car has allowed everything from truck-based SUVs to electric hatchbacks to fight for the share of the upscale pie, in some cases to the detriment of the luxury sedan's popularity. Yet most, if not all, of the core requirements remain the same, regardless of packaging. The luxury car of tomorrow will still need to provide first-class accommodations for at least 4 people. It will still need the ability to isolate the driver from the maddening crowd through insulation against noise, vibration, and harshness, and via the opportune application of superior horsepower. It will need to be a little bit bigger, brasher, and more beautiful than the everyday vehicles around it. Most of all, however, it needs to convey a sense of occasion. Ask anybody who has owned an old Mercedes 560 SEL for a long time, and they will tell you that the car never stops impressing its occupants. That, in a nutshell, is the difference between the truly luxurious and the merely costly. Measured against those criteria, each of these cars is an unqualified success. It is not surprising, really. We know what a luxury car is when we see it, and to our eyes, the LS500, Navigator, and S63 all fit the description. As with so many other aspects of modern life, however, we are now forced to look a little further and see just a little more. So while the traditional luxury sedan remains without peer, it must now face something it has never truly experienced: competition. The first drive of the 2018 Ferrari Portofino. No longer a black sheep, Ferrari's entry-level GT bumps up the power, poise, and desirability. The California was to Ferraristas what the Les Paul is to Gibson guitar fans. A Ferrari, but never the Ferrari. Yet the hardtop convertible brought thousands of new customers to dealers' doors. Moreover, it followed an important line of cars from Maranello, stretching back 7 decades that accentuated daily driving duties over track performance. Think Enzo commuted to work in a 250 GTO? The old man's choice of wheels, when pried out of his beloved Peugeot sedans, was in fact the cruisy 330 GT 2+2. So despite purist distaste for the California recipe, there are no big changes to its predecessor, the Portofino. It has a new name, cribbed from the postcard picture coastal village in northern Italy, and a lighter, stiffer aluminum structure cloth in a different design, which apes the 812 Superfast. The Portofino is more aggressive, more masculine-looking car than the California, with pronounced shoulders and an elongated fastback tail. It's handsome both in coupe guise and, 14 seconds later, as a convertible, with the folding hardtop stored in the trunk. Sitting behind the long hood, you face a slick, center-mounted touchscreen. There are seats for 4, but have a doctor and gurney standing by if you plan on subjecting friends to more than a few minutes in the back. The turbocharged V8 carries over from the California T, albeit with new pistons and intake runners and more boost from the turbos. Power raises from 552 to 591 horsepower, backed by 561 pound-feet of torque. A 7-speed dual-clutch automatic remains the only available transmission. Ask Ferrari engineers why there's no manual, and their eyes roll back on their heads like they're examining the underside of their frontal lobe. The California was briefly offered with a stick. Maybe 3 customers ordered it, according to Ferrari. An electronic limited slip differential fitted to Ferrari's mid-engine sports cars as far back as the F430, but never to the front-engine California. Works in tandem with the traction control system and magnetoreological dampers, making for more confident hammer-down cornering. Aided by an extra 39 horsepower and a claimed 176-pound weight loss, that diff also contributes to Ferrari's quoted 0.1 second improvement on the old car's 3.6 second 0 to 62 mile an hour time. Doesn't sound like much, but the Portofino feels even faster. As before, Ferrari manages boost pressure electronically to replicate the sensation of winding out a naturally aspirated engine. In lower gears, the V8 delivers a noticeable kick beyond 4,500 RPM that encourages you to chase the 7,500 RPM redline. But there's more torque and a progressively flatter curve in the upper 3 ratios. That lets Ferrari run tall, fuel-efficient gearing. It also means you can tackle uphill freeway sections without having to get overly busy with the downshift paddle. Turbo lag is there if you look for it, but only then. The sensation is of a big, naturally aspirated V8. The sound isn't quite there. You're still left hankering for some high notes, but the tone varies more this time around with less emphasis on bass. And because the exhaust butterflies now offer the precise control of electronic actuation, there's less of the annoying on-off boominess of older Ferraris. Creeping up in speed by 1 mile an hour in the ebb and flow of freeway traffic no longer elicits a sound like an old lighthouse foghorn. The Portofino is the second front-engine Ferrari, following the 812 Superfast to get electronic power steering. It doesn't tingle your fingers with old-school surface feedback, but it's responsive, accurate, and connected in a hyper-clean way. The message the wheel relays from the front tires is, in any event, reassuring. There's plenty of grip. Sharper body control puts the Portofino somewhere between the base model and the handling special package version of the outgoing California T. A sportier suspension option for the new car seems inevitable, but we can't imagine most buyers wanting more aggressive tuning, given the trade-off in comfort. In fact, it's the lack of trade-offs that makes this such an appealing Ferrari. Sure, we'd pick a 488 to rip down a twisty road, but that would be missing the point, even looking past the fact that the 488 cost almost $31,000 more. The California sales success proves there are plenty of drivers out there, people who might otherwise have bought a Bentley Continental GT or a high-end Mercedes AMG, who find a car like this a lot more alluring, more enjoyable, and less intimidating than a mid-engine wedge that looks like it just left Parc Fermé at Le Mans. For those drivers, the Portofino should make for an even easier choice than its predecessor. It looks and goes better than the California ever did. It feels sufficiently convincing as a Ferrari that won't make you flinch when pressed specifically about which Ferrari your pony branded key fob belongs to. And it does all this without compromising the usability and friendly character that help make the California the best-selling prancing horse product ever. We have a hunch Enzo would have left the Peugeot keys on the hook if he had a Portofino in the driveway. The base price was $214,533, powered by a 3.9-liter twin-turbo V8, 591 horsepower, 561 pound-feet rear-wheel drive with a 7-speed automatic, weighing about 3,900 pounds, 0 to 62 in 3.5 seconds. top speed of about 199 miles per hour. First drive of the 2018 Toyota Camry, rip snorting grille, rackish body, and a 301 horse V6. This ain't your mom's Camry. Everyone has had a Toyota Camry in their life. You've passed one, you've sat in one, you've owned one, you've opened the door into one. Statistically, it was silver. 10 million Camrys have coasted onto American highways. They say familiarity breeds contempt, but the truth is that these mid-sized Japanese sedans are too ubiquitous for even that. They're invisible. I had a Camry in my youth. It wasn't silver, it was beige, I think. However, the Camry went away for the summer and came back with a sweet tan. There's a new, stiffer architecture and 3 new engines. Hang with me here. The Baby Bear, 203 to 206 horsepower, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. The Mama Bear, 208 horsepower, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder electric hybrid. And the Papa Bear, 301 horsepower, 3.5 liter V6. It's longer, 1 inch lower, and you can order a panoramic glass roof. The sport grades include a spoiler lip, which is how you know things are getting serious. The day the 301 horsepower XSE arrived on my doorstep was a fine, sunny driving day, ripe for revving engines and rabbiting pulses. I wasn't particularly expecting a Camry to rouse my limbic system. One does not squeeze an orange and hope for apple juice. Then I noticed the leather. The seats were Tarantino red, so bright I can't stop remembering their redness. As far as shortcuts to emotions go, it's not bad. You might not feel good about that color, but you're gonna feel something. I couldn't help but notice, my postman observed, that the seats of your new car are very, very red. Later, my brother commented, "This is the ugliest interior I've seen in a long time." I liked the red. It was like a scream in a dentist's office. Everyone should be able to appreciate how substantial the new interior is. Unlike the previous Camry, which came off the anonymous rental car it often was, this cabin looked like it was actually designed. Attention to detail, like stitching on the dash, suggested luxury. Someone, the Camry murmured, gave a damn about me. I took to Virginia back roads to see if its performance metal matched those audacious seats. Okay, look, it was surprisingly fun. Whereas much of the segment has ditched the 6-cylinder in favor of turbo 4s, Toyota has re-engineered it, making it more powerful than ever. 301 horsepower at 6,600 RPM. There's also a new 8-speed auto. Use the steering wheel paddle to drop a gear, and there's an audible grumble. The chassis has been beefed up along with the engine. The body is 30% stiffer, Toyota says, and the rear suspension has traded struts for a more sophisticated double wishbone setup. The Camry clung to the back roads with startling athleticism, staying reasonably flat even under duress. However, this is a big front-wheel drive sedan. Under hard acceleration, the wheel jerked in my hands as traction control cut power unpredictably. When the needle crept up rounding the Blue Ridge hairpins, the 19-inch tires gave up sticking and took up wailing and rendering garments. Those 301 rumbling horses were marvelous, but it was easy to outrun the brakes with them. Both the pedal, feel, and steering were too pillowy to encourage any dreams of track days. Thy name is understeer. Sportier than his parents? Yes. But the XSE lands at $35,845, nearly $40,000 fully loaded, which makes it closest true competitor not the Nissan Altima, but the Audi A4 or even the BMW 320i. Both offer more assured driving experiences. But let's be real, the Camry doesn't have to perform better than a BMW. It has to perform better than the old Camry, and just as important, the crossovers have been devouring this market share of late, and it does that easily. Moreover, flawless performance isn't what generates emotion. Specificity of experience does, creating an object that serves as a mirror for its owner, the cultish Beetle, Outback, or Jeep. These cars say something about their owners. A Jeep waves at another Jeep. Such a Miata person, one says, and we nod with understanding. What does it mean to be a Camry person? The car still stands for practicality, safety, and value. A head-up display and a suite of semi-autonomous safety features, like automatic braking, come standard on the XSE, as does a trunk large enough for whatever wild animal you hit when you outstrip the brakes. But now Toyota has also given it a little something else. At the end of the week, I took the Camry out again. When I returned to the parking lot, I found the XSE surrounded, as ever, by older Camrys. With its black roof and yawning mouth, the XSE was outlandish by comparison, leaner, hungrier, younger, and riskier. It was nothing like the beige Camry of my youth. Some people would despise the car. That's a step in the right direction. Base price is $35,845, powered by a 3.5-liter V6, 301 horsepower, 267 pound-feet of torque, front-wheel drive 8-speed auto weighing about 3,600 pounds, 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds with a top speed of 130 miles an hour. Uncanny speed. To capture racing's past, Unique and Limited recreates it. Jan Rambuisk finally found the moment. Ayrton Senna's McLaren MP4/4. screaming down the back straight at Imola, passing Nelson Piquet in a flash through the Alta curves. The year was 1988. Piquet, then Formula One's reigning champion, had a front row seat to history. Those seconds at the San Marino Grand Prix, where his third-place Lotus was lapped by Senna's McLaren, foreshadowed one of the most dominant seasons in F1 history. Just one problem. Few saw the pass, and even fewer documented it. Quote, "There's not a lot of pictures, and that's just one really crappy YouTube video capturing the moment," end quote, says Rambausk, founder of Unique and Limited, an art studio in Prague. Quote, "We had talked to the people at McLaren, to Senna's main mechanic, and we were not able to identify the exact place the pass happened," end quote. Driven by the challenge of recapturing motorsport's begone zenith in high detail, Rambausk and his design partner, Peter Milorski, left their jobs in advertising to pursue the passion project that is Unique and Limited. The images they create blend traditional photography with hyper-detailed 3D renderings to explore an old moment from unseen angles. Their final product is dreamlike, straddling an uncanny valley between photorealism and fantasy, as if painted by a gearhead Norman Rockwell. Each picture is printed in large format and in limited number, commissioned by manufacturers or simply sprung from ideas in Rambausk's head and sold to clients. With the San Marino Senna project, it was McLaren who approached Rambausk with cause to celebrate. 2018 marks anniversaries for the Marquis' 1988, 1998, and 2008 F1 Drivers' Championships. Rambausk and McLaren whittled down potential milestones to arrive at that moment in 1988. Quote, "It turns out quite well with Senna because of the composition and the angle, because it's not something you see with pictures from the era, even though there's hundreds of photos from the race itself," he says. With the Hero car, one of the most successful ever to compete in F1, and its heroic moment chosen, Rambausk and Milorski set about collecting period references of the MP4/4 at Imola. They sifted through photos, videos, race reports, and their own conversations with McLaren staff to pinpoint the car's precise position on track. Imola's layout has changed over the years, further complicating things. The MP4/4's bones and the track around it were built from the reams of research. Here's where the magic starts to happen. Proprietary software selects the same point on multiple photos, say a sponsor sticker or the wheel of a car, and uses it as a reference point to stitch together an accurate model of the MP4/4, bringing the McLaren into 3 dimensions. Milorski tweaks the digital model throughout the process. Visually, the results are like the hand-sculpted clay models automakers use to prototype cars, all faceless shapes and smooth, broad edges. And the process is just as painstaking. The initial form takes Milorski up to 8 weeks. The Senna project in particular demanded an extra level of detail. Quote, "The car is basically covering the entire picture," he explains, whereas every other point in the firm's catalog features the car at a further distance. Quote, "This was trickier in terms of the texturing and rendering because it's so large," end quote. Fortunately, Unique and Limited had special access to the MP4/4 at the McLaren Tech Center. The team shot thousands of photos of the car for reference. Quote, "We sent the model to McLaren for the final checks," he says. "They sent it to McLaren designer Neil Oatley, who found a few mistakes on the bolts and wheels of the car, which you can't even see," end quote. The fussing continued. Digital layouts of texture and grime were added. Bolts were weathered as if clashed with virtual wrenches. A 3D model of Senna's torso was created, down to the torn threads of his driving gloves. The obsessiveness became more evident in the way Rambausk and team anchor the visual work in reality. In a different photo shoot, set in the Italian village, fans lining cobbled streets were actors on location, dressed in period garb. In another, a fire hose created puddles of mist. Each of these scenes was captured in detail photos and layered into digital images. For the McLaren project, Ayrton's nephew, Bruno Senna, sat on a stool in Unique and Limited's Prague studio. His face was lit to recreate the bright Italian sun, then photographed to capture a hallmark of F1's turbo area, his uncle Ayrton's ferocious gaze. Bruno's eyes were then digitally placed inside Ayrton's Dayglow helmet, a haunting professional match. The cinematic quality and real-life or fantasy vibe of UNL's work are due in part to Isabel, the third member of Unique and Limited. She previously was a casting agent and producer for films and commercials. Meddling reality, photography, fantasy, and cinema is tricky, she says, noting that it's tempting to lean more towards fantasy or reality for the sake of convenience. So why make the effort? We ask ourselves that question every day, she laughs. It's a quest to create something new from limited resources, such as black and white images of Mercedes-Benz Silver Arrows, cars seldom captured on film. We decided to tell stories in a way never seen before. For Rambausk, it's about the challenge of creating the most accurate historic models that don't exist in reality, of pursuing beauty and an end unto itself, of pushing into undiscovered territory for its own sake, he says. Quote, "The creation process is some kind of signature for what we do, so that's the reason we should stick with it," he says. "If we have a guy who wants his 911, a road legal car you can take onto the street and shoot, then that's not really a project for us. Anyone can do that," end quote. So you want an old car? Don't be fooled by the romance. The downsides are many, but so are the rewards. The plain truth of classic cars is that many simply feel old, not charming or kookly vintage, just ancient and unresolved. Many people buy their first classic based on looks, then become disenchanted when the drive doesn't mirror the song of the sheet metal. If you're considering bringing a classic into your life, and you actually want to drive that sucker instead of just watching it appreciate, depreciate, leak all over your garage floor, spare yourself the inevitable anguish and empty bank account by first considering two key questions. What do you want to do with it? Vintage cars are like a marriage. Life with one is give and take, where it pays to be honest. Ask yourself why you want old wheels in the first place. The joy of a simple machine for backroad jaunts, Sunday ice cream cruises, commuting, or long road trip adventures? The key is matching your expectations to the hardware. Generally speaking, though, old cars are less technically proficient than modern cars, but they have fewer filters between you and the road. The older the machine, the slower, more agricultural, and more direct it's likely to be. Go back in time far enough, you'll find transmissions that won't let you leave your driveway without practice, unsynchronized crash gearboxes, mostly from before World War II, stagecoach suspension, and rod-operated brakes that verge on suicidal in modern traffic. None of which is to knock that life. If you want a high-effort weekend chest exercise that will feel like a break from the modern world, go ancient. Buy a wood-body pre-war like the 1930s MG or an old Ford or Austin Special. You'll get out-dragged at stoplights by indifferently driven minivans and set up for stop signs years before you touch the brakes in a normal car. You'll learn to skate around on skinny cross-ply tires with the grip of ice butter, drifting in a single lane, not always on purpose, 20 miles an hour below the speed limit. You'll know the joy of unpowered steering that shouts the road into your palms, but also the happy terrors of barely located solid axles and drum brakes that can fade when you need them most. In short bursts, this stuff can be exhilarating. It can also be exhausting. This is partly why cars from the dawn of the automobile are relatively affordable, and why people gravitate to classics from the 60s and 70s, when the industry was evolving rapidly and still relatively uninfluenced by safety regulations. Cars from those decades remain simple enough to feel direct and engaging, but they're also relatively durable. They handle decently or can be made to with minor modifications. Most can be operated with anyone who can start a new Toyota. With proper maintenance and regular exercise, few cars in this era need constant attention to keep running. The middle ground lies in the years between. Most 40s cars were little more than pre-war carryovers, low-cost stopgaps to get car makers and drivers back in the game. By the 50s, however, the engineering world had been fully converted from war making. With the right car, that decade can be a happy medium. A taste of the performance the 60s became known for, with some of the raw, built by a blacksmith edge of the pre-war era. You will still get the slides and terrible brakes, but most 50s cars are resolved enough to not feel like automotive hair shirts. Traffic will require patience and planning, but your heart won't spend as much time in your throat, and cross-country trips will feel like attainable adventure, not an expedition to the moon. Or maybe you want a car that feels relatively vintage but gives zero compromises in normal life. By the 80s and early 90s, Japan, Germany, and Detroit were all building reliable, comfortable, and durable machines that could rip down a highway at extra legal speed. Much of the fun, fast stuff built in that era is now common on the used market, and it's largely overlooked by collectors. Next to heavy, complex modern iron, even an 80s Honda Civic, with its manual gearbox, airy cockpit, and curb weight under 2,500 pounds, can be an eye-opening giggle for the remarkably low buy-in. And second, what's your appetite for quirk? Call it the stuff that a new car doesn't make you think about. It could be safety, that deeply personal examination of acceptable risk. My friend Greg Long thinks that every child should grow up around a Citroën 2CV, a car with all the crash protection of a fat motorcycle. It should go without saying that not everyone is like Greg. Or maybe it's just a naggle that gets in the way of regular use. Maybe you live in Seattle and want to tackle your commute with an early air-cooled Volkswagen Beetle. The wipers on a Beetle are little more than a prayer for a break in the clouds, and the car's defrost system is about as effective as a breeze over a lit match. All of which will give you one more reason to leave the thing on a battery tender during the months where your city is rained upon nonstop. The basic rule: it's one thing to trot out a car like a show pony, warm Sundays only. Even sloppy engineering and murderous road manners can be fun for a few hours. Trust me, I once owned a Renault Le Car. But long relationships are their own kind of sublime joy. And with cars, which means miles on the clock. The next step is to get educated. Think long and hard about your taste. Pour through Craigslist and bring a trailer. Read. Go to your local Cars and Coffee. Find an old car you love and ask the owner what it's like to live with. And remember, don't buy a vintage car as a static investment. Buy it because you like it. An undriven car is basically furniture, which is all and well for some people, but then you're not reading Recliner and Throw Pillow, are you? Throwbacks. Channeling the past while staying in the present is hard to get right. Just ask Volkswagen about the new Beetle, but groovy things are happening in the watch world, namely cribbing vintage aesthetics and executing automotive tie-ins with style. These watches do both. Tag Heuer's Monaco is motorsport's most iconic watch, partly for gracing Steve McQueen's wrist, but mostly because legends like Mario Andretti, Jochen Rindt, and Clay Regazzini wore them. This variant, the Caliber 11 Golf Special Edition, for about $5,900, features the blue and orange stripes of Gulf Oil's Racing's livery, which adorned the Le Mans winning Ford GT40 50 years ago. In a similar vein, the blue and white dial on Autodromo's Ford GT Endurance chronograph for about $695 recalls a Le Mans glory, with a foot firmly in the present. The watch is licensed by Ford as a companion to the new GT. If splashes of color aren't quite your speed, check out Tudor. The Heritage Black Bay Chrono, for about $4,725, retains a modern size but picks up vintage cues from Tudor and Rolex's archives, like snowflake-shaped hands and old-school chronograph pushers. All are proof that past and present can live in design harmony. Automakers take note. And the final story for this magazine, the $100,000 pickup. What's behind sky-high vehicle pricing? By the famous Bob Lutz. A top-trim diesel dually pickup will push that $100,000 barrier today. A Cadillac Escalade or Lincoln Navigator will crack it. Stuff of fantasy a few years ago. I own a 2008 GMC Denali with everything. I still have the sticker. $48,000 and change. Fast forward to 2015, when I bought a new GMC Yukon XL Denali for a bit over 70 grand. New Tahoes can be close to 70 grand new, Yukon's even more. What is happening here? Is it just too much? Will customers revolt? What are manufacturers thinking? Truth is that pricing has been skewed to the products the public wants. Product planners have to marry two totally different portfolios. The first is a lineup that will trigger lust in the buying public. The second has to meet increasingly stringent fuel economy regulations and electric vehicle mandates. EVs and hybrids, despite breathless, unrelenting media hype, are not in great demand. Every American thinks their neighbor should buy one, but sadly, these must be sold and in sufficient quantity to satisfy the government. That means low prices, low lease rates, and in almost all cases, losses for the manufacturer. The big companies have also wasted enormous sums of capital on fuel average enabling small cars, like the Ford Fiesta and the Chevy Sonic and Spark. They sell below cost and after a few years of generating losses are left to die, if the mandates can be fulfilled without selling them in volume. Meanwhile, Impala and Taurus sedans languish on dealer lots as F-150s, Silverados, and Ram pickups fly off them. Full-size SUVs, large crossovers, anything high and with all-wheel drive is hot. Car companies need to remain solvent, so they adapt. If we lose money on these, we'll compensate by pricing more on these. And the public so far accepts it. American car buyers are not price sensitive. They are monthly payment sensitive, and it doesn't matter for how many years their loans go. As a result, financing periods have evolved from the old 36-month norm to 48 months, then 60 months, and recently 84 months. The car will be worn out before it's paid off, and the customer has negative equity for almost the whole financing period. Leasing is another way out. A lease is essentially a customer covering a vehicle's depreciation while driving it. A vehicle that is sought after depreciates less than a wallflower. Thus, the seemingly insane situation where a slow-selling luxury sedan can have a much higher monthly lease rate than far more expensive full-size pickups or SUVs, which enjoy great demand as 2 or 3-year-old off-lease vehicles. Most manufacturers manipulate lease rates by absorbing the difference between the calculated residual value and the lower real-world one. It's a hidden incentive called subsidized lease, and it accounts for a lot of sales. So, list price isn't really that, and lease rates that covers depreciation usually aren't that either. Loading pricing on hot vehicles while losing money on the less desirable is becoming a ubiquitous yet dangerous practice. It's bound to continue until government adapt fuel economy and CO2 regulations that are less at odds with how consumers select their next ride. I'm reading from the November 2019 Road and Track. This is the editor's letter, embracing trucks, for 1 month only. We get emails. Some are addressed to the wrong car magazine. Some are complimentary. Some replace the ampersand in our name with the word, quote, and a capital offense. To be clear, we're Road and Track, or R&T for short. Our sister publication is Car and Driver. Road ampersand track, and then car spelled out and driver. Many of these emails have one specific typo. The writer calls our publication Road and Truck. Muscle memory during typing, a U laid down in place of an A, is probably responsible for the majority of these, but regardless, it's the most frequent error we see. We decided to embrace that misnomer for a whole issue. Before you write that angry email, let me explain. Yes, Road and Track has been the sports car magazine of record since 1947, but the car world is changing. Pickups, SUVs, and crossovers have skyrocketed in popularity, and manufacturers, once known solely for cars, now have a fleet of taller, heavier vehicles. BMW has an entire lineup of SUVs, plus less useful versions of those models that the company insists on calling coupes. Mazda makes its money on compact crossovers, not Miatas. Rolls-Royce has an SUV. Even Ferrari will soon have a high-riding car. Don't let Italians hear you call it an SUV, though. Ford, the company that gave our country its first affordable passenger car, has announced its plan to end passenger car sales in America in favor of crossovers, pickups, and SUVs. By 2022, the Mustang will be the Blue Oval's only real car in the States. Side note, this has actually held up well. If you race a car, you likely tow it with a pickup. You might drive one daily or use it for weekend errands. And if you don't, a neighbor does. Pickups in general have transformed the world, not just in culture as with Bigfoot, the original monster truck, but also the environment. For enthusiasts, the door swings both ways. Without trucks, some of the best cars and car companies wouldn't exist. Porsche canceled an entire endurance racing program in the early 2000s to create the Cayenne SUV. The move was beyond aggravating for the brand faithful, who believed that the company should only build sports cars, but it ended up being prescient. Porsche's bottom line went bananas after the Cayenne was introduced, and the engine from that canceled Le Mans program lived on as the V10 heart of the Carrera GT, one of the greatest supercars of all time. It also laid the foundation for the V8s in the 918 Spider. In 2019, the Cayenne and Macan made Porsche boatloads of money and gave the company the financial leeway to build the track-focused GT2s, GT3s, and GT4s we all love. It doesn't hurt that the Cayenne is actually impressive. Porsche recently offered us a turbo to try on track. We booked a day at Lime Rock Park, our favorite bull ring in the Northeast. The turbo makes 541 horsepower but weighs more than 2 tons. How could that be? A quick road car like the Boxer GTS can set lap times at Lime Rock right around the 1 minute mark. The Cayenne's quickest was a minute 3.8. Outrageous! And reassuring. For whatever reason, Porsche has made sure a truck that will likely spend most of its time at the mall is also competent on track. Yes, you can feel the weight. Yes, the Cayenne can be pushy. No, it's not the quickest thing ever, but there's something oddly satisfying about chucking a heavy SUV up onto curbs and breaking it down from 135 miles an hour with 3 other people in the car even, and doing it for more than 2 laps without overheating the brakes or tires. That might not sound like a lot, but some regular cars can't pull off the trick. This capability isn't normal though, but it's becoming more common in performance SUVs. Even if you don't want to admit it, the Cayenne and vehicles like it are a key part of our world. That doesn't mean they're boring or need to be ignored, or that you need to embrace them and suddenly declare yourself a fanatic, but the interesting is out there. There are reasons to be excited. For this issue, the T in R&T stands for truck. We've always weighed in on what's new, what affects sports car fanatics like you and me, and those vehicles have never been more relevant. Sponsor logos. It's a sooty, torque-filled, beer-soaked spectacle. Smash hit. How the 1993 Jeep Grand Cherokee changed car show debuts forever by Bob Lutz. Driving the first Jeep Grand Cherokee up the steps of Detroit's Cabo Hall and through an enormous plate glass window to enter the 1992 North American International Auto Show has to be one of the most memorable vehicle introduction stunts in history. As president of Chrysler at the time, I was behind the wheel with Detroit's Mayor for Life, Coleman Young, in the passenger seat. The image of the new SUV smashing its way into Cabo in a shower of glass appeared in all major media. The feat created major awareness for the new vehicle for a fraction of the cost of a conventional advertising launch. But the stunt was not as reckless as it appeared. We had to obtain permission from the managers of Cabo Hall, who had justifiable concerns about safety. The mayor's office had to approve his participation in a seemingly perilous act for the benefit of a corporation. Luckily, his owner was not adverse to a bit of favorable publicity, and so I wound up driving him down the potholed Jefferson Avenue, his security detail 50 yards aft, and into our launch position at the bottom of the steps. The window we were soon to shatter was, in itself, the object of detailed planning and construction. To minimize the risk of huge shards of glass penetrating the windshield and injuring the mayor or me, workers had removed the heavy plate window a few days before and replaced it with an identical-looking pane of tempered glass, guaranteed to shatter into thousands of popcorn-sized particles. And we stacked the deck in our favor, placing tiny explosive charges around the window frame to guarantee simultaneous dispersion of fragments and make the moment as spectacular as possible. Mayor Young and I lurched our way up the steps in 4-wheel drive, low range, first gear. The view through the windshield showed nothing but sky. his owner exclaiming, "Holy meep!" as we climbed. We inched across the terrace, nearing our entry point, which was nowhere near a door, as a huge crowd of automotive media watched from inside. We had an inside man buried in the crowd who carefully watched our front bumper and, via a small remote, triggered the explosive charges at the crucial moment. The effect was magnificent, the Grand Cherokee charging into the building amid a spectacular gleaming of swarm of glass particles. I stopped the Jeep, and the mayor and I emerged, seemingly endless round of photo flashes and TV cameras. Both of us were covered in glass crumbs, which had rolled off the roof of the vehicle when we opened our doors. The whole event was the fruit of the fertile mind of the late Tom Kolowski, head of product communications at Chrysler and later VP of corporate communications at GM. He and his small team devised the outrageous vehicle introduction shows that became a Chrysler hallmark of that era, often imitated by competitors who never quite achieved Chrysler's level of spontaneous, seeming irreverent fun. Kowalski was behind the 1993 unveiling of the revolutionary new Dodge Ram pickup, the truck that changed the U.S. market from a Chevy Ford duopoly into a three-way contest. The setting looked completely standard, a darkened black curtain stage, upon which rested, in familiar auto show fashion, the hulking shape of a pickup under a drape, to be unwrapped by lovely maidens at the speaker signal. Yawn. But when the presenter said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the all-new Dodge Ram," a gleaming red and silver Ram pickup dropped from the ceiling, smashed the draped object flat. Once again, our debut was on every news channel. But originally, I was slated to ride in the pickup truck for the drop, but someone vetoed the idea, presumably after talking to the insurance company. Tom's task was made easier by the culture at Chrysler. We often describe ourselves as a band of misfits, cast off from larger, more serious companies and driven by the underdog's desire to show our worth. When Lee Iacocca assumed leadership of Chrysler in 1978, he had recently been terminated by Henry Ford II. After more than 3 decades at Ford, Hal Spurlock, a genius product planner and the unquestioned creator of the minivan, had suffered a similar fate at Ford and had joined Chrysler before Iacocca. My own departure from Ford to join Chrysler at Iacocca's urging was not as a result of dismissal. Rather, it stemmed from a powerful feeling of not being appreciated at Ford. I delivered results, but not in the Ford way. Asked about my move to Chrysler during a golf outing, then CEO of Ford Don Peterson carefully placed his ball on a tee, stood up, and said, "I prefer to think of Bob's move to Chrysler as Ford being rid of the last of the misfits." Bingo! I had found the proper home. In a company where almost everyone in a senior position came from somewhere else, there's no rigidity to the culture. No talk of "the way we've always done it is the correct way." Everything and every method was in a constant state of flux, subject to many heated discussions, often involving raised voices, profanity, but also laughter. In short, it was a corporate environment that provided fertile ground for innovation, experimentation, and creativity. The Band of Misfits launched a string of unquestionable hits in this era. It started with the outrageous Dodge Viper and continued with the Jeep Grand Cherokee, the Ram, the Dakota, the Durango SUV, the LH Sedan Trio, the Neon Compact, the Cloud Cars, the Chrysler Cirrus and Dodge Stratus, and of course, the Plymouth Prowler. It was an era of cutting-edge design, highlighted by joyfully unconventional auto show debuts. Competitors called us lucky. But it wasn't luck. It was unbridled creativity and a willingness to take risks, even if it meant driving a mayor through the glass window of Cabo Hall. Jessie Combs, 1980 to 2019, a woman to inspire generations. Born in South Dakota in 1980, Jessie Combs grew up in a family that loved off-roading and motorsports of all kinds. She graduated at the top of her class from Wayo Tech in 2004 with a degree in custom automotive fabrication and launched her career soon after. She hosted automotive TV brands including Overhaulin', All Girls Garage, and Mythbusters, building numerous cars and motorcycles along the way. She raced King of the Hammers, that baffling off-road brawl, winning the spec class in 2014, and had a Class 10 podium finish at the Baja 1000 in 2011. In 2013, she broke the land speed record for fastest woman on 4 wheels at 398 miles an hour. Combs died on August 27, 2019, piloting an F-104-based jet car known as the North American Eagle Supersonic Speed Challenger, chasing down Kitty O'Neill's record of 512.710 miles an hour and the title of the fastest woman in the world. Anyone can look up Combs' resume. Her list of accomplishments is long and varied, but she was more than a TV host, a fabricator, and a driver. She was an icon who touched the life of everyone she met. The general public may recognize her face from screens and her racing accomplishments, but they don't know what a truly incredible human being she was. Relentlessly positive, Combs was generous, warm, funny, passionate, and tenacious. Teresa Contreras met Combs as part of an all-woman build for SEMA. They quickly bonded over motorcycles and rode together to the inaugural Babes Ride Out women's motorcycle rally in 2013. We get out there and she said, "I like the way you can keep up with me." Contreras laughs. In 2014, when Combs won the Ultra 4 King of the Hammers spec class, Contreras was her co-driver. We complimented each other. It was just easy. We love doing all these things together. Aside from the love of off-roading and fabrication, the two shared a passion for educating other women, so they formed a nonprofit called Real Deal Revolution. She was always adamant that it's not about me, Contreras says. Jessie knew she had a brand, she had a name, but she didn't want to use that to promote what Real Deal was. She wanted Real Deal to become its own community and for it to take over. Combs' warmth and humor had a way of putting people at ease, allowing them to open up to her. "I'm very happy that I've been able to know her for as long as I have," she said. "There's a huge hole in my heart." Long before Real Deal, Combs was inspiring women throughout the industry. Anya Violet, co-founder of At Wild Motorcycle Apparel and Babes Ride Out, remembers Jessie as a symbol. She stood as an example of a woman who has gone after her dreams and pursued her passions while continuing to be uplifting and inspiring to others along the way. Not only was she a vibrant and fun-loving person to be around, but she had a way of empowering people and leading by example that left a lasting impression on many. One of those people was Crystal Hess, founder of Motorcycle Missions, a nonprofit aimed at helping veterans overcome post-traumatic stress disorder by building and riding bikes. Hess says Combs inspired her to learn how to fabricate. She was the light in the room. If she made eye contact with you, even if there was 100 other people, she just gave you everything. Hess spent time with Combs at the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally for the past few years and counted her as one of her heroes. She could do everything she wanted to. She's an inspiration to so many people, to the younger generation, especially females. So much of that inspiration stemmed from Combs' positivity. Even when things went wrong, her attitude was indomitable. Meldon Van Ripper Stoltz III, founder of the Race of Gentlemen, remembers the year Combs campaigned a Craftsman Twin T race car and the steering wheel came off. She laughed her ass off and managed to get the car back to the starting line with the steering wheel around her neck. Boy, did we laugh. Her life was packed with similar stories. Adversity met with a smile. Terry Madden, Combs' racing teammate and boyfriend, remembers the first time they competed together in a borrowed vehicle for the UTV World Championship. They didn't have much time to inspect and prep before heading on the track. "We ended up sitting on the side of the track with 3 broken axles and an electrical issue," he says. "That moment I learned a few things about Jessie, and she taught me a few things about me. We are both super competitive, and I was extremely bummed we didn't finish." But Combs didn't accept the defeat as her failure. She looked at me and said, "We didn't do anything wrong. We didn't hit anything. We didn't abuse it. We didn't prep it. We did our job." Madden took the lesson to heart. "What I really learned was how to pick my failures." So many people bonded with Combs over work, but more often than not, those connections were a thread that started a more complex friendship. Sophia Singos, a fellow fabricator and part owner of GT Moto, met Combs at the Hand-Built Motorcycle Show in Austin, Texas. Their shared skills and passion for fabrication brought them together, but over time, Singles looked up to Combs more as a sister than a professional mentor. Raised by her father, Singles was used to being the only woman in her immediate circle. Combs was the first of her kind in Singles' life. "Because of her, I've been able to trust a lot more women who've come into the industry and give them the time and learn to be as patient as Jessie was to get to know people." She says through tears, "She changed who I am as a human, and I never realized that until now. I don't think I ever told her that." In an industry that has predominantly celebrated women for their looks, not their skills, the loss of someone who is so genuinely talented is felt by nearly every woman struggling to be taken seriously in the automotive world. But beyond everything that Combs accomplished and everything she stood for, she was an exceptional person. We'll miss her light. Even if she didn't have all those abilities and all those accomplishments and this background, if you ripped all that away from her, she was still this incredible, genuinely friendly human being, Singo says. She was just amazing. An ode to a Cummins. Say goodbye to the best pickup Nissan ever built. The Nissan Titan XD Cummins is dead after 4 years of production. Starting in 2020, the Cummins turbo diesel 5-liter V8 will no longer be available in Nissan's full-size pickup. It's part of an effort to staunch the brand's bleeding. Nissan reported a 44.6% drop in operating profit from 2017 to 2018, and through the first 6 months of 2019, Titan sales were down nearly a quarter from those months last year, at slightly more than 18,000 units. In the same period, Ford moved nearly 450,000 F-Series. We spent 2 months with the 2019 Titan XD Cummins Pro 4X, living with the pickup through the heart of the summer. It's easy to fall for a vehicle then, when there are seemingly infinite hours to point the hood at a highway, drag a trailer a few states away, and come back with something foolish. When the second gen Titan launched in 2015, the company imagined it would slot between the wave of increasingly car-like half-ton pickups and the country's new class of insanely capable three-quarter-ton beasts. But domestic automakers live and die by their trucks, and they funnel massive resources into constant product improvement. When the Titan XD debuted, a properly outfitted F-150 boasted a maximum tow rating of 12,200 pounds. With the burly Cummins, the XD managed 12,640 pounds. 4 years later, the updated F-150 could pull 13,200 pounds, easily eclipsing the Nissan, which sat on the market essentially unchanged. But more and more, the vehicles we enjoy aren't spec sheet wonders. The Titan Cummins is satisfying because it reminds us of our favorite trucks from the past. It is unapologetically a pickup, with a simple, logical interior free of useless tech gimmick. That diesel V8 makes itself known, pleasantly churring away past the firewall and offering a groundswell of torque on command. The XD has nicely weighted hydraulic steering instead of vague electric assist, and a stout 6-speed Isin automatic. Every bit of the Titan is recognizable as traditional truck, down to the column-mounted shift lever. If you've spent any time fumbling with the massive Tombstone touchscreen and rotary shift selector in a Ram 1500, or waited impatiently for an F-150 to pick one of its 10 gears, you know what the Detroit 3 seem to have forgotten. The best tools are simple. Nissan's pickups have always tilted the other direction. From the earnest, no-frills D21 hardbody of the 1980s and 90s to the current Frontier, a truck that found 39,322 homes in the first half of 2019, despite being largely unchanged since its 2005 debut. But the pickup market has swung towards high-margin, high-dollar trims. The move has left buyers who want a simple, inexpensive work vehicle with nowhere to put their money. The XD Cummins attempted to bridge the gap. Maybe its biggest mistake was not leaning further into what made Nissan trucks successful in the past. We're accustomed to the rise and fall of models and trims, but the loss of the XD Cummins feels different. A good truck cursed by a segment moving at lightning pace. It feels like another step in the pickup's evolution from honest workhorse to generic commuter. Damn shame. Speed Secrets by Ross Bentley. Believe it, because fast is all in your mind. Watch video of Ayrton Senna or Gilles Villeneuve, and you'll have to wonder if there's really a limit to how fast a car can travel around a racetrack. Sure, the laws of physics apply, but how do you explain that Villeneuve was 11 seconds faster than the entire field in the rain during the US Grand Prix qualifying at Watkins Glen in 1979? 11 seconds. Some of his competitors got out of the cars and walked to turn 1 to watch him. They must have wondered when the laws of physics were going to kick in. Senna's 1993 drive in the European Grand Prix at Donington Park is another example. In the rain, on the first lap, he moved from 5th to the lead, making Michael Schumacher, Alain Prost, and Damien Hill look like ranked novices. Prost was then a 3-time Formula One world champion. He would land his 4th that year. Hill would clinch the series title in 96, and Schumacher would go on to notch 7 titles between 94 and 2004. Senna simply drove around them. The rain is where we often notice the biggest differences between common driving performances and the extra special ones. The differences are there on sunny days too, just harder to recognize. Wet weather means reduced grip, and reduced grip requires more control and nuance, no matter what the car. Rain has been called the great equalizer, though it's really a differentiator. It separates drivers and influences their belief in themselves. When you watch a driver do something that seems impossible, it obviously wasn't impossible. All else being equal, it simply happened because they knew they could make it happen. Is there a limit to one's beliefs? Physics says yes, of course, but driving at the limit happens in the mind before anything happens with the steering wheel and pedals. F1 is a prime example. The drivers there are some of the best in the world, but a rare few are constantly able to drive faster than their teammates in what is essentially the same car. And while there are other factors at work, how a driver works with their engineer to tune the car's setup is critical, for example, they aren't the differentiator. Stanford psychology professor Dr. Carol Dweck defines 2 basic human mindsets, fixed and growth. I was fortunate enough to contribute to some research Dweck did early in this era, specifically with race drivers. Guess what? The best drivers have more of a growth mindset than others, an attitude best described as there's always more. Even at the top levels of the sport, some drivers curb themselves by believing they can't go any quicker, while others continually look to improve. In 1993, Nigel Mansell passed me on the outside of turn 1 of Michigan International Speedway at something over 230 miles an hour. If I could have moved my head against the 4Gs in the cockpit of my Indy car, I would have given him a disbelieving cartoonish-like shake. Why did Mansell not recognize that he was literally half a mile per hour away from careening into a concrete wall? I'm guessing the fact never crossed his mind. His growth mindset was looking for more, and he believed he could find it. Not that believing in limits is bad at all. Acknowledging the edge of the possible is the only thing that stops us from trying every corner at full throttle and top gear. But ultimately, what separates the great drivers from the truly special ones is entirely in the head, regardless of reasons. For Senna, it was a spiritual belief that he could do the near impossible. Villeneuve just didn't seem to care. He either totally accepted that it would happen to him, that big career or life ending crash, or the idea never crossed his mind. Of course, Senna and Villeneuve each died at the wheel of a race car. The risk is always there, and you have to balance an acknowledgement of that with your deepest, most extraordinary inner confidence. Isn't that what most attracts us to our sport in the first place? Witnessing the extraordinary? The absolute best hit those heights often, leaving us marveling at the sight, and sitting there wondering how it happened as they disappear into the distance. Smithology by Sam Smith. Longbed. Club Racing and the Ladder Frame Snooze. The true and spectacular story of club racing on $0 is the story of sleeping in trucks. To a lesser extent, it's also the story of sleeping in minivans, sleeping in trailers, sleeping in small tents with holes in them, and the one time I had to choose between buying race gas and a $40 room in a Motel 6. I didn't have a truck or tent or a minivan or whatever, so I slept on a friend's floor in that motel for free. $40 is a lot of bucks when you don't have $40. The floor was fine, save how the carpet smelled like sump pump. Still, it was mostly trucks, or at least the nights I remember. The first was around 15 years ago at Blackhawk Farms Raceway, a charming little Illinois road course with a grass airstrip and big trees. I towed the car there on a fall afternoon at the wheel of a borrowed late 1990s GMC Suburban. Sunny fall day, lovely place. World right and proper. Rolling into the paddock, I threw the truck into park and climbed out to set up camp. Stomped around in the dirt, mucked with tent poles and stakes, as you do. Somewhere in the middle of all this, a train of thought crept up. Raised its head to the back of the class, was finally called on. You have a bed, it said slowly, as if explaining things to a child. And you don't even have to tie it to the ground. I took a moment. Looking down at that tent pole in my hands, it made sense. Tents can be messy. The Suburban had locking doors, no fumbling with a rain fly, space to stretch out. A plan formed. Tent back in the bag. The train left the station. I racked out on the Suburban's middle bench, lightly dressed, warm in a thin sleeping bag. Crickets chirped, stars twinkled. The world was perfect. The next day, entirely too pleased with myself, I attempted a repeat. A thunderstorm lit off at 3 in the morning. One of those Midwestern ear splitters, all booms and cracks. A thunderclap knocked me bolt awake. Groggy, I forgot about the Suburban, stood up on reflex, and wanged my head off the dome light like a gavel on a block. The recoil tossed my body back into the seat, which then decided it was tired of all the abuse, thank you, and bounced my torso onto the floor in an arms-filling pinwheel that burrito wrapped my face in a blanket and twisted one hip in a manner that made it hard to walk for an entire day. The train of thought derailed into a gully. I blinked a few times, unwrapped the blanket, and lifted my head. The Suburban's interior was a meat locker, victim of Midwestern cold snap. A thin drop of blood ran down my forehead. My torso was wrapped in 4 old t-shirts and a single dirty sock had been shoved into my pants. My overnight bag was under my legs and jammed behind the front seat, face down and open, empty. This is what happens when you're apparently so cold and tired in the middle of the night that you sleepwalk on your own open luggage and salt shaker an entire bag of clothes over your body in an attempt to stay warm. I remember none of this act. There was also, for some reason, a toothbrush under my shirt, tickling a nipple. We will not talk about how it felt to have a toothbrush there, except to say that it was worse than you might accept, and also somehow nicer. Even monkeys learn from experience. From that night grew a methodology. I never again tried to sleep on a bench seat for one. Like any civilized gentle person, I also learned to stick to cargo areas with a flattish floor. Race weekend packing began to resemble prep for a polar expedition because the inside of a non-running vehicle at night is somehow always colder than a brass bra on an iceberg, even in summer. And finally, earplugs. Storms are jerks. You can snooze in Rams, Tundras, Tacomas, Sierras, Colorados, Silverados, anything. I've sawed logs in most of them, always under a sort of happy symmetry. Race cars are purpose-built, Spartan objects of illogical lust, and so are pickups and old SUVs. Question: why does firing an F-150 through Eau Rouge or Floodplatz at full yell sound so fantastic? 15 years is a long time. My bank account is now semi-respectable. I can afford to go racing about absent this silliness. I miss it in the same way you miss high school, but you never want to go back. The memories are a reminder of how great it is to want something so badly that you talk yourself into having nothing to lose. That the takeaways with any worthwhile human endeavor are rarely predictable. The surprise joy is always the biggest. Even if one of them is waking up with a full face of dome light and minor hip damage that lasts 15 years and feels totally permanent and is probably going to heal any day now, even though the bones make this weird clicky noise when you get up in the morning and bend over in a way that makes you feel like an old man. But that's fine, really. Happens to everyone if they're lucky enough. Totally worth it. Nobody goes racing looking for any sense anyway. If you do, you're not going to find it in a face full of carpet. And only occasionally in that old sock in your pants. Engine Nerdy by Jason Camisa. Unthrottle pedal, the ones and zeros beneath your heavy right foot. I'm a devout displacement fan, so the thought of a 4-cylinder engine in a Chevy Silverado makes me twitch. The issue isn't outright speed. The Silverado's new 2.7 liter makes nearly the same horsepower and torque as the truck's optional 5.3 liter V8, but refinement and response. I was concerned until I drove it. Turns out, you can say a lot of nice things about the Silverado's four-cylinder, but what's most impressive is the ease with which the engine seems to go about its business. I say seems because there are dozens of virtual levers continually being yanked in the background to make the truck respond to your demands. If the four-banger Silverado had a simple fuel injection system and a stick shift, it would be laggy, thirsty, and ultimately undrivable. But this little engine, heavy truck combo exists only thanks to a change of philosophy, one that grew from the advent of by-wire electronic throttles several decades ago. It occurred to powertrain engineers that when you press the throttle pedal on any vehicle in an automatic transmission, you're not actually asking to open the throttle. You're not even necessarily asking for the engine to make more power. You're simply asking for more torque at the driven wheels. Because of this, modern cars interpret the right pedal as a drive wheel torque request, not a request for engine torque. It's then up to this powertrain computer to choose the combination of transmission gear and engine output that best satisfies the demand. But, and here's where it gets fun, the computer controls so many variables that it doesn't simply specify the engine's output, it also gets to decide how that torque should be produced. The Silverado's computer governs transmission gear selection, torque converter lockup force, camshaft phasing, intake valve lift and ignition timing, fuel injection timing, fuel mixture, electric wastegate position, cylinder shutdown, and of course, throttle position. With its fingers in all these pies, the computer can continually vary events behind the scenes to maximize fuel economy. Under low load, for example, the Chevy can shut down 2 of its 4 cylinders. That would normally more than half engine output by definition. So dropping 2 pistons without affecting axle torque requires a ballet of perfectly timed changes to nearly every powertrain component. The most obvious of those changes being to crack open the throttle. Cylinder deactivation is a boon because gas engines are typically most efficient at or near full load. As a result, powertrain computers tend to favor cruising in top gear with the throttle either nearly or fully open. Shutting down cylinders reduces an engine's available power, making the active cylinders work harder and bringing them closer to their maximum output. Because the Silverado's computer controls the turbocharger's wastegate electronically, the truck can cruise wide open without handling intake boost. Should the driver demand more engine torque, the computer will begin to close the wastegate and let the turbo spool. To stay cool under boost, however, turbocharged engines burn extra fuel. There is thus a point at which the requested axle torque is most efficiently generated by avoiding boost. The computer will downshift the gear so that the engine can run at higher RPM and lower load. It doesn't stop there. The computer may realize that it would be even more efficient to downshift 2 gears instead, reducing engine load to a point where it can operate wide open throttle, but on just 2 cylinders. At the same time, it may slightly unlock the torque converter to avoid an RPM range containing a resonant vibration. Imagine doing this kind of calculus in your head when all you wanted to do is to keep a constant speed up a hill. Even more amazing, the computers don't just live in the present, they predict what's coming next. For example, as you tip into the right pedal, the computer may guess that you're about to request even more torque than you asked for. To prepare, it can momentarily crack open the throttle and change valve timing to increase overlap, sending a puff of air downstream into the exhaust to spool the turbocharger. The Silverado's computer does this in concert with other quick changes, all so masterfully orchestrated that you don't hear or feel any of it. It's comforting to know the electronic equivalent of 100 little nerds is toiling away under the hood of your pickup. But the net result is that the Silverado simply does what you ask, even if it means ripping a V8 like 7-second run to 60 miles an hour. The payoff is an EPA certified 10% improvement in fuel economy over the optional 5.3 liter V8. And given the 4-cylinder's weight advantage over the larger engine, several hundred pounds less on the truck's nose, the 4-pot Silverado sees significantly better cornering grip and braking. It's also quieter at idle, full throttle, and cruise, without using any active sound management. Displacement is wonderful, but nothing makes me happier than nerdy unintended consequences. Rip out the gas pedal, replace it with the torque request pentometer, and suddenly it's a 4-cylinder world.